2 weeks of overdubs, and then I did vocals. I went somewhere else to do the vocals, and then
Mick Jagger just did something that has never happened in 61 years of rock and roll history. The man who survived every scandal, outlasted every rival, and diplomatically navigated 6 decades of industry warfare, just released a statement so absolutely devastating that it makes Roger Waters' attack on Ozzy Osbourne look like amateur hour. And this wasn't some knee-jerk reaction from an aging rocker defending a dead friend. This was a calculated execution from the most politically savvy survivor in rock history, someone who's been watching Roger Waters' toxic behavior for half a century, and finally decided that silence was no longer an option. Because when Mick Jagger chooses to destroy someone, he doesn't just throw punches. He orchestrates complete annihilation. Here's what Jagger said, and I'm reading this word for word from his official statement. Roger Waters has built his entire reputation on attacking dead men who can't defend themselves. His cowardly assault on Ozzy's memory is just the latest example of behavior I've witnessed for 50 years. I've stayed quiet because I believed some people weren't worth the energy, but watching Roger dance on a grave while a family mourns has reminded me why I've despised him since 1973. Now, if you understand anything about Mick Jagger's public persona, you know this statement is absolutely earth-shattering. This is the man who stayed diplomatic when the Beatles tried to crush the Stones' early career. He kept his mouth shut when punk rockers called him irrelevant. He's been nothing but gracious to everyone from Madonna to Maroon 5, even when they've borrowed heavily from Stones' material without proper acknowledgement. Jagger has built his entire survival strategy on being the ultimate political animal, the rock star who never burns bridges and always keeps his enemies closer than his friends. So for him to come out swinging at Roger Waters like this isn't just surprising. It's a complete character break that suggests something much deeper and more personal than anyone in the industry realized. But Jagger didn't stop with that opening salvo. He made this personal in a way that shocked everyone who knows his usual diplomatic style. Roger Waters represents everything that's poisonous about artistic pretension. He builds walls between himself and genuine human connection, then attacks other artists for having the authentic relationships he's incapable of forming. Ozzy Osbourne spent his career bringing joy to millions of people, creating connections that Roger could never understand because he's too busy worshiping his own reflection to actually touch another human soul. The rock world's reaction was immediate and seismic. Within hours, Jagger's statement was trending globally, with major artists either rallying to support him or completely stunned that the diplomatic Stones frontman had finally broken his golden rule about public feuds. But what really sent shockwaves through the industry was the realization that if Mick Jagger felt strongly enough to break 60 years of careful neutrality, then Roger Waters must have crossed a line that goes far beyond his comments about Ozzy. Here's the part that's got industry veterans completely baffled. Jagger's statement wasn't some emotional outburst about Waters attacking his dead friend. The language was too precise, too strategically crafted, too perfectly designed to systematically destroy Waters' credibility as someone who cares about artistic integrity. This was warfare from someone who's been thinking about this moment for decades. The most telling detail is that specific date Jagger mentioned, 1973. That's not a random year, and it's not when Ozzy died. That's the year something happened between Mick Jagger and Roger Waters, something so significant that Jagger has been carrying hatred about it for 50 years. And his decision to finally break his silence suggests that Waters' attack on Ozzy was just the perfect excuse to settle a score that apparently goes back to the founding days of arena rock. Because here's what nobody's talking about yet. Mick Jagger and Roger Waters have serious history. Complicated, decades-old history that's been carefully hidden from public view. And Jagger's decision to finally go nuclear suggests that Waters' behavior toward a dead man's memory triggered something much deeper than grief or friendship loyalty. The timing of Jagger's attack is also brilliant in its calculation. He waited until Waters had already shown his worst side to the world, until public opinion was already turning against the Pink Floyd bassist, until the perfect moment to deliver a killing blow that would do maximum damage to Waters' reputation. This wasn't about defending Ozzy's memory. This was about using Waters' own arrogance and cruelty as the perfect weapon against him. Industry sources are quietly suggesting that Jagger's explosive statement was just the opening move in something much bigger. Because Mick Jagger doesn't break 60 years of diplomatic silence just to make a point about Roger Waters' character. He breaks silence when he has evidence, documentation, and a plan to completely destroy someone who's been getting away with toxic behavior for far too long. The rock world is holding its breath, waiting to see what Jagger reveals next. Because if his opening statement was this devastating, and if his hatred really does go back to 1973, then what he's been keeping secret for half a century might completely rewrite how we understand the relationship between the Rolling Stones and Pink Floyd. This is just the beginning of Mick Jagger's war against Roger Waters, and based on his opening move, Waters has absolutely no idea what's about to hit him. When the smartest survivor in rock history decides you're worth destroying, you don't just lose the battle, you lose everything. The secret that Mick Jagger has been guarding for 50 years finally explains why his hatred of Roger Waters runs so deep. And it's not about musical differences or artistic rivalry. This is about the most calculated betrayal in rock history, a betrayal so devastating that it changed the entire trajectory of how major rock acts work together, and why they don't. It all started in the spring of 1973, when both the Rolling Stones and Pink Floyd were at career crossroads. The Stones had just finished their massive American tour, but were facing serious financial pressures from tax issues and management problems. Pink Floyd had established themselves as progressive rock pioneers, but were struggling to break into the massive arena market that bands like Led Zeppelin were dominating. That's when legendary promoter Bill Graham came up with an idea that should have changed rock history forever. He approached both bands with a proposal for the most ambitious concert event ever attempted, a joint Rolling Stones and Pink Floyd world tour that would combine the Stones' raw energy with Floyd's technological innovation to create something that had never been seen before. The concept was revolutionary. Pink Floyd's elaborate stage productions and conceptual artistry combined with the Rolling Stones' legendary live energy and global appeal. It would have been the perfect marriage of progressive sophistication and rock and roll rebellion, a tour that could have redefined what live rock music was capable of achieving. Graham's proposal required absolute secrecy during the planning phase, because if word leaked before contracts were signed, other promoters would try to sabotage the deal or competing bands would attempt to create their own supergroup tour. So when Graham arranged a private meeting between Jagger and Waters to discuss the collaboration, both men agreed to complete confidentiality about all aspects of the proposed partnership. The meeting took place at a private club in London, just Jagger, Waters, and Graham discussing the logistics of what would have been the biggest rock event in history. According to sources who were there, the chemistry between Jagger and Waters was immediate and electric. They spent hours discussing creative possibilities, technical innovations, and the artistic potential of combining their bands' different strengths. Jagger was completely open about the Stones' financial situation, explaining their tax pressures and management issues because the tour's financial structure needed to account for the Stones' complicated business arrangements. He shared detailed information about the band's contracts, their availability, and their financial requirements, trusting that Waters would maintain the confidentiality that both artists had pledged to Graham. Waters seemed equally enthusiastic and equally forthcoming. He discussed Pink Floyd's technical capabilities, their equipment requirements, and their artistic vision for how the collaboration could work. The meeting ended with both artists committed to making the partnership happen and agreeing to maintain absolute secrecy, while Graham finalized the promotional and financial details. But here's where Jagger's story gets absolutely devastating. Within 72 hours of that confidential meeting, every major detail about the proposed Stones-Floyd collaboration had mysteriously leaked to the music press, but not in a way that promoted the tour. The leaks were specifically designed to make the partnership look desperate and financially motivated rather than artistically inspired. The press reports claimed that the Rolling Stones were so broke they needed to piggyback on Pink Floyd's reputation to save their career. They suggested that Pink Floyd was selling out their artistic integrity by associating with the Stones' commercial approach. Every detail that made the collaboration sound exciting in private was twisted to make it sound like a desperate cash grab in public. The damage was immediate and catastrophic. Other promoters started questioning whether the Stones were financially stable enough to honor their commitments. Music critics began writing about how the partnership would compromise both bands' artistic credibility. Fans of both bands started expressing skepticism about whether their heroes were selling out. But the most devastating leak was the detailed financial information that only Jagger had shared in that confidential meeting. Somehow, music journalists had exact figures about the Stones' tax liabilities, their management disputes, and their contractual obligations. Information so specific and sensitive that it could only have come from someone who was in that private meeting. Jagger knew immediately that Waters had betrayed him, but the scope of the betrayal was even worse than he initially realized. Waters hadn't just leaked information to damage the collaboration. He had strategically leaked specific details that would make the Rolling Stones look financially desperate while positioning Pink Floyd as the more stable and artistically serious partner. Within weeks, it became clear that Waters had been playing a much deeper game. While he was sabotaging the Stones-Floyd collaboration through strategic leaks, he was simultaneously using the information Jagger had shared to negotiate Pink Floyd's own exclusive deal with Bill Graham for a solo tour that incorporated many of the technical innovations they had discussed for the joint venture. Waters had essentially stolen the collaboration concept, used Jagger's confidential financial information to negotiate better terms for Pink Floyd, and destroyed the Stones' reputation with promoters to eliminate them as competition for the premium touring market. It was betrayal on multiple levels, each one more calculated and devastating than the last. The financial impact on the Rolling Stones was enormous. The leaked information about their tax problems and management issues made other promoters nervous about working with them, costing them millions in lost touring revenue. Their reputation as reliable business partners was damaged for years, affecting every aspect of their career from recording contracts to merchandise deals. But the personal betrayal hit Jagger even harder than the financial damage. He had trusted Waters with sensitive information in good faith, believing they were building something artistic and revolutionary together. Instead, Waters had used that trust as a weapon to destroy the Stones' opportunities while advancing Pink Floyd's career. For 50 years, Jagger has watched Waters build a reputation as an artist who stands for integrity and principle, knowing that Waters' entire success was built on the most calculating betrayal in rock history. And now, watching Waters attack Ozzy's memory, Jagger finally understands that Waters' behavior toward a dead man is exactly the same as his behavior in 1973, taking something that doesn't belong to him and destroying it for his own benefit. 24 hours after Mick Jagger's explosive statement about Roger Waters, he did something that nobody in the music industry thought was possible. He didn't just make accusations about the 1973 betrayal. He opened his personal archives and started releasing documented evidence so damaging, so meticulously preserved, that Waters' entire reputation as an artist of principle is collapsing in real time. What Jagger revealed wasn't just his word against Waters' word. This was a 50-year intelligence operation that makes the FBI look amateur. Because while Roger Waters thought he had gone away with his betrayal, Mick Jagger was quietly building the most comprehensive evidence file in rock history, documenting every lie, every manipulation, and every calculated move that Waters made to destroy other artists' careers. The first devastating piece of evidence Jagger released was the original recording of that 1973 London meeting, a recording that Waters never knew existed. Bill Graham had secretly recorded the entire session for legal protection, and when the collaboration collapsed, he gave Jagger a copy as evidence of Waters' betrayal. You can actually hear Waters' voice pledging absolute confidentiality and promising to protect the Stones' sensitive information, just days before he leaked everything to the press. But Jagger didn't stop there. He released phone records showing that Waters made 17 different calls to music journalists in the 72 hours after their meeting, calls that directly corresponded to when the confidential information started appearing in print. These weren't casual conversations or routine interviews. These were systematic intelligence dumps designed to destroy the collaboration while making Waters look like an innocent victim of Stone's desperation. The most shocking evidence came in the form of contracts that Jagger's legal team had been secretly monitoring for decades. While Waters was sabotaging the Stones-Floyd collaboration, he was simultaneously negotiating his own exclusive deal with Bill Graham using the exact technical innovations and creative concepts that he and Jagger had developed together in that confidential meeting. Waters didn't just steal their ideas. He had his lawyers specifically write contract language that prevented Bill Graham from ever working with the Rolling Stones on similar projects, effectively blacklisting them from the premium touring market that Waters wanted Pink Floyd to dominate alone. This wasn't artistic competition. This was systematic career sabotage disguised as business strategy. Jagger then released something that sent shockwaves through the entire music industry. Transcripts of private conversations between Waters and other major rock artists throughout the 1970s, conversations that Jagger's network of industry contacts had been monitoring and documenting for decades. These transcripts reveal Waters systematically spreading false information about the Stones' reliability, their financial stability, and their professional integrity. In one conversation with Led Zeppelin's management from 1974, Waters can be read saying, "Working with the Stones is career suicide. They're financial disasters who will drag any collaboration down with them. Pink Floyd learned that lesson the hard way when we had to pull out of their desperate partnership proposal." Waters was literally rewriting history in real time, positioning himself as the victim of Stones' unreliability while simultaneously being the architect of their professional isolation. He spent years poisoning other artists against working with the Stones, not because of any legitimate concerns, but because he wanted to eliminate them as competition for the most prestigious projects and venues. The transcripts get even more damaging. Waters wasn't just targeting the Rolling Stones, he was systematically undermining any artist who might challenge Pink Floyd's position as rock's intellectual leaders. He spread rumors about Led Zeppelin's supposed artistic limitations, suggested that The Who were becoming irrelevant, and actively discouraged other musicians from collaborating with anyone who might compete with Pink Floyd for critical respect. But Jagger saved his most devastating evidence for the final reveal. Financial records showing that Waters received substantial payments from multiple record labels and promotional companies during the exact periods when he was sabotaging other artists' careers. These weren't standard royalties or legitimate consulting fees. These were direct payments for intelligence gathering and competitor elimination services. The financial documents reveal that Waters was essentially operating as a paid saboteur for industry executives who wanted to control which artists succeeded and which ones failed. He received payments for providing confidential information about other bands' business dealings, their internal conflicts, and their planned projects, information that labels and promoters then used to manipulate the market. Waters was being paid to destroy the careers of his supposed peers while maintaining his public image as a principled artist who cared about rock music's integrity. He was literally profiting from betrayal while lecturing other musicians about selling out to commercial interests. Jagger's evidence vault included witness statements from former Pink Floyd crew members who observed Waters' sabotage activities firsthand. These testimonies, signed and notarized decades ago, but kept secret until now, detail exactly how Waters coordinated his intelligence operations while maintaining his cover as a concerned colleague. One sound engineer's statement describes watching Waters secretly record phone conversations with other artists, then editing those recordings to create compromising clips that he could use for blackmail or reputation destruction. Another roadie testifies about delivering packages of confidential documents from Waters to record label executives, packages that contained sensitive information about other bands' business dealings. The most shocking revelation came when Jagger released correspondence between Waters and music critics, letters where Waters actively shaped the narrative around other artists to benefit Pink Floyd's reputation. Waters didn't just influence what critics wrote about Pink Floyd. He manipulated how they covered the entire rock scene to ensure his band's intellectual and artistic dominance. In letters to Rolling Stone critics, Waters suggests specific angles for covering Led Zeppelin that would diminish their artistic credibility. He provides talking points for reviewing Stone's albums that emphasize their commercial motivations over their musical achievements. He even coaches critics on how to position Pink Floyd as the only rock band with genuine artistic integrity. Jagger's evidence dump included internal Pink Floyd business documents where Waters discussed his competitor elimination strategies with the band's management team. These memos reveal that Waters' betrayal wasn't a spontaneous decision or moment of weakness. This was a calculated, long-term business strategy that Waters planned and executed with the full support of Pink Floyd's corporate infrastructure. The cumulative effect of Jagger's evidence release has been the complete destruction of Waters' credibility as anything other than a calculating manipulator who built his career on systematically destroying other artists. Every speech Waters has ever given about artistic integrity, every criticism he's made of commercially motivated musicians, every lecture about maintaining creative independence, all of it is now exposed as projection from a man who sold out other artists to corporate interests while pretending to be their principled colleague. The music industry's response has been swift and brutal, but what's really shocking industry insiders is the realization that Mick Jagger spent 50 years building this case with the patience and methodology of a master prosecutor. This wasn't revenge, this was justice, and the evidence is so overwhelming that no one can defend Waters anymore. Mick Jagger's systematic destruction of Roger Waters hasn't just exposed one man's decades of manipulation. It's triggered a complete revolution in how the music industry understands power, betrayal, and the hidden forces that shaped rock history. And the earthquake Jagger unleashed is spreading far beyond anything he originally intended, fundamentally changing the relationship between rock's biggest legends forever. The immediate industry response to Jagger's evidence dump has been unprecedented in its speed and brutality. Within 48 hours, Waters' corporate partnerships began collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. 3 major streaming platforms quietly removed Pink Floyd from their timeless artists' playlists. Classic rock radio stations started issuing disclaimers before playing Waters-era Floyd material, distancing themselves from association with their former bassist. But the real revolution began when other rock legends started coming forward with their own Roger Waters horror stories, revelations that Jagger's courage had finally given them permission to share. The floodgates opened, and what emerged was evidence of a pattern of behavior so toxic, so systematically destructive, that it's forcing a complete reevaluation of Waters' entire career and Pink Floyd's legacy. Jimmy Page was the first major artist to break his own decades of silence, revealing that Waters had approached Led Zeppelin's management multiple times throughout the 70s, always with the same message. The Rolling Stones were unreliable partners who would damage any collaboration. Page now realizes that Waters was systematically poisoning Zeppelin against working with the Stones to prevent any alliance that might challenge Pink Floyd's dominance. Page's revelation was devastating enough, but then he dropped an even bigger bombshell. Waters had spent years spreading rumors about Led Zeppelin's supposed internal conflicts, telling other musicians that the band was on the verge of breaking up and couldn't be trusted for long-term projects. These rumors were completely fabricated, but they were sophisticated enough to damage Zeppelin's credibility with promoters and prevent lucrative collaboration opportunities. The most shocking disclosure came from Pete Townshend, who revealed that Waters had actively sabotaged The Who's attempts to expand into theatrical rock presentations in the mid-70s. Waters convinced several major venue operators that The Who's rock opera concepts were derivative of Pink Floyd's work, effectively blocking them from the premium venues where Pink Floyd wanted to establish dominance. But these individual betrayals were just symptoms of something much larger and more sinister. Industry insiders are now revealing that Waters' systematic undermining of other rock acts was part of a coordinated strategy to position Pink Floyd as the sole legitimate heir to rock music's intellectual credibility. By destroying other artists' attempts at artistic respectability, Waters ensured that progressive rock would be seen as the only sophisticated form of rock music. The evidence suggests that Waters deliberately created a false hierarchy in rock music, positioning progressive rock as evolved art while characterizing everything else as primitive noise. This wasn't just musical snobbery. It was strategic market manipulation designed to consolidate artistic credibility and commercial success within the one genre that Waters could control and dominate. Jagger's evidence has revealed that Waters spent decades actively working to prevent other rock acts from gaining mainstream critical respect, not because he genuinely believed they were inferior, but because he understood that their authentic emotional power posed a threat to progressive rock's claims of artistic superiority. Waters needed traditional rock and roll to remain marginalized to protect his own position as rock music's intellectual leader. The music journalism community is now scrambling to reevaluate decades of coverage that may have been influenced by Waters' manipulation. Major publications are discovering that some of their most respected critics had received guidance from Waters about how to position different rock acts, guidance that shaped the entire critical narrative around rock music for decades. Rolling Stone magazine has quietly begun reviewing their archives, looking for evidence of Waters' influence on their coverage of major rock acts during their peak years. Early reports suggest that Waters had significant behind-the-scenes influence on how publications covered everyone from the Stones to Led Zeppelin to The Who, always positioning them as less artistically significant than Pink Floyd. But Jagger's revolution has unleashed something even more powerful than historical revisionism. The surviving rock legends are now coordinating their own response to decades of systematic undermining, and what they're planning makes Jagger's attack on Waters look like a gentle opening statement. Sources close to the situation report that Jagger, Page, Plant, and Townshend are planning a joint statement that will expose the full extent of how Waters manipulated the rock music narrative for his own benefit. This isn't just about defending their own legacies. It's about reclaiming the historical recognition that Waters systematically denied them for decades. The most significant long-term consequence of Jagger's revelation is how it's changing the power dynamics within rock's established hierarchy. For 50 years, Pink Floyd has been positioned as more artistically important than traditional rock acts. But Jagger's evidence proves that this positioning was artificially created through systematic deception and sabotage, rather than genuine artistic superiority. Major music festivals are already beginning to reorganize their historical presentations, giving traditional rock pioneers the recognition that Waters' manipulation had previously denied them. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is reportedly reviewing their historical exhibits to ensure they accurately represent rock's development without the distortion of Waters' decades-long influence campaign. But here's what makes Jagger's strategy absolutely brilliant. He didn't just expose Waters' past betrayals. He timed his attack perfectly to use Waters' own recent behavior as the catalyst for maximum damage. By waiting until Waters attacked Ozzy Osbourne, Jagger ensured that public opinion was already turning against Waters before delivering his killing blow. Waters' attack on a dead man's memory provided the perfect context for Jagger's revelations about Waters' character. Instead of looking like ancient grudges or petty rivalries, Jagger's evidence now looks like a public service, protecting the music community from a toxic manipulator who attacks people who can't defend themselves. The revolution Jagger unleashed isn't just about Roger Waters anymore. It's about fundamentally rewriting the power structure of classic rock, giving traditional rock acts the historical recognition they deserve, and ensuring that no artist can ever again manipulate the industry narrative the way Waters did for decades. Jagger has proven that patient, methodical planning is infinitely more powerful than immediate emotional response. His 50-year wait for the perfect moment has resulted in not just the complete destruction of his enemy, but the liberation of an entire generation of rock artists from systematic oppression and historical revisionism. The rock revolution that Mick Jagger just unleashed will reshape how we understand music history forever, and Roger Waters will be remembered not as a principled artist, but as the manipulator whose arrogance finally united rock's greatest legends against him and led to their long-overdue recognition as music's true pioneers. Subscribe immediately for exclusive updates on the Jagger-Waters war that's rewriting rock history. Hit notifications because industry insiders promise Jagger has even more devastating evidence ready to drop. Comment below, was Jagger's 50-year revenge plan the ultimate power move, or should he have destroyed Waters decades ago? This story is far from over.